I grew up during the Second World War. I used to stand by the road in the little country town I came from, watching the soldiers going in their trucks, and then when they were going overseas, invariably I seemed to acquire their fox terrier mascots or things like that. So, and my wife was, my mother was a spotter for Japanese aircraft up at the local roads board. Luckily no Japanese aeroplanes ever assailed us, but you know, it was part of the ambience, and the ladies all made camouflage nets and what have you. And my mother would get these letters from my father, whom basically I've got a very vague recall of him at the beginning when he was in the embarkation depot down near Swan River, and I remember as a tiny child trying to find a hole in the wire fence for him to get through, and then he went away, and when he came back he was a total stranger. The only thing I found interesting about my father was his peak cap. I can remember that. Yeah, well, it's all important to know. For example, one of the things that you had to acquire quickly in Vietnam was to know what was normal and what was not. And I was taught a fairly salutary lesson. I was coming up from Maria towards the task force. This is very early in the piece, and we had this Vietnamese warrant officer who was about your build, and we all called him Odd Job. He was sort of like that bloke in the Bond movies. And all of a sudden he shouted, "Stop, stop," and we came to a juddering halt, wondering what the hell was going to happen. And over in the paddy field there was a line of people planting rice. Didn't mean a damn thing to us, but, I mean, beyond what they were doing. But he'd realised that they were all men, not women, and women plant rice. And so you've got to learn what's normal, and for example, you've got to learn, if you want to survive, you've got to learn what birds sing in the day and what birds sing in the night when they're disturbed. And that kind of, I suppose, almost Red Indian kids play instinct takes a while to get hold of. The long tan started for me. We'd been Sheldon mortared the night before, but it didn't fall on our position. The artillery got a bit, and the engineers. A friend of mine lost his leg. He changed bed places. He's an engineer, and he changed bed places, and his mate would have lost his head, but because they'd reversed their beds, he lost his leg. Anyway, the next day. I mean, there was a bit of running around, but not overtly. We went off to see little Patty. My driver, Piggy O'Rourke, is still the oldest 60s rocker that I've ever come across. And he took her, after the concert, took her for a ride up to 5 RAR. And in the middle of all this, we could hear the artillery going shug shug straight over our heads. And it got more and more until I realised that it was well over a battery's worth. It was, in fact, a regiment fire. And got back to the squadron. I went under the shower, and a runner came over from SHQ saying the Major wants you with his map. And that was the sort of signal that we were off again to play rescuers or silly buggers or whatever. I chose the route because there's we'd call it a river, but a creek called Sui de Bang. At a point when I'd been involved with the 173rd Airborne Brigade fighting in Long Phuc, I'd seen a buffalo entry and exit, a buffalo cart entry and exit, and there was an agricultural dam or something. So I knew I couldn't get swept down because it was raining like Billy-O at this stage, monsoonal rain. It's got to be seen to be believed. And so anyway, I took off and got to the wire at the engineers, and blow me down, they'd altered the gap that was there. And the engineers were off at dinner, so I had to send a runner over there. Eventually got someone back, they opened the gate, Then I got told to send 2 carriers back for the CO who changed his mind and was going to come out with us. So I did that, and then I pushed on because I realised it was going to take us a while to get over this creek because of the rain, and it certainly was. And when I got to the creek, I expected them to catch up. Well, they hadn't caught up with me, so I left another carrier, Tony O'Shea was commanding that, to secure the crossing. And we actually did an assault crossing. That's where you put them over in small groups and secure the other side and come across, because up on the hill, quite a long way away, I could see all the artillery coming, so I knew where I was going. And despite having been ordered to halt, I could hear the problem that D Company was in, so I pushed on. And we came across the flat after crossing this stream in flood, which was going well over the legal speed for us to swim in. I might just digress and say that back in Australia, the only water crossings we'd done were in Lake Eppalock, which was dead flat, glassy and no current. Lovely graded entrances and exits. Well, here, the problem is if you go in at too deep an angle, the water gets ingested through the engine on the top. Even though you've got a bilge pump, it can't contain the water. So this was all right, but we were actually swimming. But we had an additional problem in the year the carrier had been running, the troop, our carriers had been running. All the shrouds, which the black rubber things that go along the track, had become busted. We had none, and they're a very vital part of steering in the water. So one of my carriers actually did a complete circle, bumping against the dam, so that stopped it sweeping downstream. And people don't seem to understand that was a battle with nature. Anyway, we got through amazingly quickly, and we didn't drown anyone. A carrier got drowned the next day in much less difficult conditions. I put my carriers into 2-up formation. That's 2 forward, 1 back, 2 forward, 1 back, and myself in the middle. And in the normal course of events, I would have had a reserve section, but they were still stuffing around, picking the CO up. We crossed the road that ran between Longfook and Long Tan. That village was just a ruin from the previous year or something. The Vietnamese and the Americans had gone in there. And we burst, the rubber was young rubber on the outside. It was about crew commander head heights. You couldn't see down. Once we came through that, it was in a way like the ground stood up. There were all these dudes in green, and they had packs on their back and what have you, camouflage. And just for a split second, I thought they were, our dudes. But my Corporal Gross on the far right, he said, "Contact enemy." Is a part Aboriginal, I don't know what part, but he was an Aboriginal guy. He yelled out, but lives in Queensland now. And so we began to fire. The enemy withdrew in very good order. They had rat and loops around their ankles, and they were dragging their wounded back. And by fire and movement, that's to say some of them were firing at us and others were pulling their people back. Somewhere in the order of about 100 people. We had a frontage of about 120 metres, and they were more or less equally distributed across our front. We got through that group, then we hit a second wave, a distinct and second wave of these people, again approximately around 100, 150, I don't know. And they were all withdrawing. The first lot had been going towards the task force. What happened was Clements, who was my far left carrier, and the carriers that I'd had to borrow to make up the troop had no gun shields. And Clements was hit in the tummy, and ironically, the doctor told me that the flak jacket that he'd got from the Americans slowed the bullet down, or bullets, and they tumbled around inside him. So he was badly wounded. I sent that carrier back. I got to say it was a moment of compassion. If I'd been a rock-hard soldier, I suppose I wouldn't have done it. But he lived until he was 20, till the 27th of August, and the American Red Cross donut dollies, they were called, told me that I'd, at least given Peter a few more. And it didn't make any material difference to our situation. On the right, I was using a sunken road as the axis because that led towards Harry Smith's position. On the right-hand side, the carrier just over the road from me, Corporal Carter's carrier, his 50 calibre jammed, and he leapt up on the top with an OM machine gun and killed the crew of a recoilless rifle, who subsequent to the action I discovered, they fired, hit a rubber tree, and then they fired again, hit the same rubber tree, but the rain had got into the gun site, their gun site, and it caused parallax error, which is why they missed and why they lost their life. And all these other people were busily trying to kill us, and we were trying to kill them. Terrible. It's terrible when you have to run over and through people. Anyway, about this time, the CO, after this had happened, that's when the CO finally got to us. That's when the CO finally got to us. And he asked my troop officer who was carrying him if I'd assault east, which I did. And the fire was enormous. One of the things that stays with me, it was all the rubber trees exploding with the white sap. It doesn't look like any more like it did then, but then it was like a great green cathedral, fairly clean underneath. So we did that assault, then he asked us to break it off, so we did, and we came back at an angle and formed a line between D Company and the enemy, but there was no more fighting. All that you could hear, and it was quite dark by that stage, and all you could hear was the groaning and noise of people crawling away and whatever. And we stayed there for, I don't know, an hour or whatever it was, while the CO and Harry Smith made up their mind what they were going to do next. I was looking at my map. We had these wonderful picto maps, which are photographs, but they've got the grids on, and I could see that out to the west of where we were, at the edge of the rubber, there was a banana plantation and some what looked like cleared ground. So eventually we loaded up D Company, and I put the dead on the front carrier in case we were hit going out. Told the blokes to herringbone, that's all, if we were hit, but nothing happened. The CI6R and A Company and the little number of B Company that were there, they followed us out, and when we got out in that area, I formed into a hollow square with the cargo hatches open and the interior lights on, and then I stood out in the middle of the square with my radio operator Jock McCormick, and we guided the helicopters in. I'd never done that before. I didn't actually know. A couple of years later, I was on a special course and I learned how to do that. But one of the advantages of being an officer is you're so bloody busy trying to deal with the situation in front of you and think about what next, because in an armoured vehicle, you've got to think at the speed of the vehicle, which let's first say is about 20 kilometres an hour. So you've got to actually try and anticipate from map and head what's coming and what might come and where it might come. So you're dealing with two things all the time. If you're any good, if you're not, then you get whacked. You're totally absorbed. It's afterwards that it catches up with you. And the strange thing is that even as I've been talking, while I can't remember my shopping list down in Coles, I can remember every flash and bang and what have you very clearly. And it never seems to go away or become less. Well, we're working on operations all the time because the Vietnamese were perfectly aware of who we were, where we were. The task force laid itself down in what I call a pie crust perimeter, because, just to give you for instance, there was the APC squadron to the west of the Route 2, and then there was this huge gap and 5 hour on the other side of the road, and when I say huge, damn near a kilometre, and they put up all this barbed wire and said minefield. I didn't realise at that stage, but certainly when I was on the second tour, I understood what North Vietnamese sappers were like, and that would have fooled nobody for no time at all. These are guys the sappers who'd strip down to shorts, no shoes, and feel through in front of themselves for the prongs on jumping mines, for example, and they get through just in the dark. I'm talking now too. Amazing. When I came home the first time, I remember standing on the edge of Luscombe Field watching my troop going out on operation, because I'd got up earlier, I was coming back earlier. I got back to Melbourne, Victoria, and I was in the kitchen with my mother-in-law and my wife, and they were talking about matters domestic. And all my head said was, I want to go back. This is foreign country, I don't belong here. So I went back. That was one of the reasons. The other reason was that I genuinely felt concerned for the Vietnamese people, and I had a much closer, by virtue of the training team, a much closer relationship with Vietnamese people, and I still retain affection and respect for them.